Ever felt like you're repeating the same day over and over, like in those time loop movies? You wake up, cue Valorant, and boom, another loss chalked up to the same old mistakes. It's like Groundhog's Day, but for gamers. It's really frustrating. You're putting in hours grinding through matches, but still finding yourself stuck in the same spot. You're not alone though. Every single day during our coaching sessions, I see these patterns and the same slip-ups from players left and right. It's like watching somebody trip over the same crack in the sidewalk every single morning. I'm just watching these matches and I want to shout, "Watch out," but you can't hear me. This is why I identified the 8 game-losing mistakes that almost every single one of you is making every single day. The good news is these are all fixable mistakes. With a little bit of guidance and some practice, we could steer you clear of these pitfalls and you could start racking up wins. Why in the world should you trust me though? Well, my name's Casey and I have been playing Valorant ever since day one. I was originally placed in Iron, but eventually was able to climb my way all the way up to Immortal 3. I've been one of the top 4,000 players in North America in nearly every act since, but that's not why you should trust me. Honestly, I've still got a lot of room to grow as a player. You should trust me because I've been coaching players just like you every single day for the past 4 years, helping them climb just like I did. I specialize in really simplifying the game and giving players easy to follow rules that transform their gameplay. Here's the secret: the game isn't really as complicated as you think. And by the end of this video, I'm hoping that I can prove that to you. So buckle in and let's get ready to break this endless cycle of losing that you've been on. Now tell me if this sounds familiar. You peek into an angle with the intention of gathering info or to take a fight half-heartedly. You're kind of just going through the motions and you don't really expect an enemy to be there. Then when you finally see an enemy in front of you, might take a second or two, you send out a few panic shots and proceed to die. The problem here is not necessarily that you took the fight, but more so that you weren't even really trying to take the fight. You made more of a half effort to win the gunfight, and then after you saw the guy, you tried to back out. Once you've swung the angle, if you were half prepared to take the fight, it's generally better to just commit to it. If you get in your own head after seeing an opponent and second guess yourself, you'll panic and lose the engagement. I see this a lot, particularly when a player commits to a peak and sees 2 players in front of them. They panic, and rather than just committing and taking the fight, they end up spraying or trying to get away and dying. Once you're wide swung, it's too late to back out. Don't think you have to kill all 5 players, just focus on getting one. Pick one guy and say, "That's my kill." There will be times when you get caught off guard, and when you do, always just focus on getting your one. The better you get at this, 1 will turn into 2 and 2 will turn into 3. Eventually, you'll be landing those sick multi-kill clips that everybody wants to get. Now, for our second mistake, we've got to talk about something that most of you have probably heard of, but maybe don't fully understand. It's called scaling. Scaling essentially is pushing a certain area and taking that space. An example of scaling would be you and your team pushing up long on B site bind as the attackers. Walking up long and taking it essentially forces the enemy back onto site and forces them to give up space. One of the main issues we see, which causes a lot of losses, is trying to scale areas like this completely dry. If the enemy team is showing any pressure throughout the match, scaling with utility is super important. If you decide to scale dry, a single well-placed flash from the enemy sky can easily put your team on TikTok. There are tons of ways that you can scale safely. You could molly the right side so nobody could swing. You could flash inside to blind them before they swing. You could dart or drone up long. You could even smoke it if you really need to. But most often what you'll see is players just running up long with their gun out and getting absolutely massacred when the defense has a trap set up. This same thing can be seen pretty commonly on Icebox A site. Everyone forgets to use utility early on, so that when that jet jumps up onto pipes or tries to push into nest, they land 2 to 3 kills and completely destroy your round. It's important to use initiator util to force players off of these early angles to allow your team to get closer. Then once you're closer, you'll often see more utility be used to help your team push even further. You're scaling up, hence the term scaling. Use your utility to scale. You will thank us later. Now for a more common one, but an important one. Holding crouch in gunfights can be quite detrimental. Crouching makes you more accurate, sort of, but it's important to note that it also makes you a much easier target to hit. You crunch your model into a half size, making a headshot super easy to adjust to, and you become very immobile. Players at every rank will be able to kill a crouching target fairly easily, so try not to drop into sprays while crouching too often. It's important that you understand this first and foremost. It's also important to note that there is a time and place to crouch. Using crouch to hold angles can be fairly strong, as players with a firm grasp on crosshair placement will be thrown off a bit after they swing. You can also utilize crouching in gunfights periodically in a strafe battle with your opponents. A lot of players will take advantage of this, especially on pistol rounds, as it can force the enemy's crosshair lower during the extended gunfights. Sometimes it can even be better to crouch after landing a tag onto the enemy player and slowing their movement speed, since it will be much easier to land a spray to finish them off. It's important to recognize the difference between spamming and holding crouch while spraying, and periodically including it into your gunfights. There are some exceptions to this, of course. For example, if you're playing Jett or Reyna, since you have a get out of jail free card, sometimes crouch spraying can be a bit better. But for the most part, it's a pretty bad habit that you just don't want to build up. It takes a long time to break, and if you're at all confused on if you should crouch or not, probably just choose not to for the time being. This leads us to our next mistake. Recognizing what agents are good for what types of peaks and playstyles is really important. It's also important to note that some agents are good and bad at some maps. For example, Omen kind of sucks on Breeze due to the wide open space where players can dodge his blind and his difficult time smoking sights. Omen is best played on maps with tight corridors, which is why you'll often see him on Split, Sunset, and Ascent. Alternatively, Viper is amazing on Breeze because she can block wide open areas with her wall. When you're picking your agent, it's best to understand the strengths of the agent and the way the map is played. Many people only really consider this though when they think of the controller role. They'll just go on their merry way and they'll pick Reyna on every single map. This can be a massive issue though. If you're loading into Lotus, maybe it's better for you to pick Raze instead of Reyna, since fighting for A control is a lot easier when you have Raze utility to help, and Reyna doesn't offer as much for her team when it comes to fighting for space. Or if you pick KO instead of Skye, it's important to remember that you're sacrificing her info utility, which on a map like Split might be really nice to help clear out those pesky shotgun angles. The meta in Valorant has been pretty established for some time now, and although you can get away with playing anyone in ranked, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy to play anyone in ranked. Now, one of the biggest mistakes players make every single day actually has to do with neglecting their fundamentals. Sure, there are a dozen of videos out there that break down how to do fancy lineups or cool setups that you can do for your agent of choice, but rarely do people actually go in depth on the things that actually help you climb. This includes things like aim mechanics, positioning, movement, and how you play off of your teammates. That's why we went ahead and detailed how to master all of these things in our hour-long masterclass over at SkillCapped. We break down everything that you need to know to master the fundamentals so that you can go from looking like this to looking like this. Our whole site is also backed by a rank improvement guarantee, so if you don't climb, you don't pay. There's a reason that we've been around for over a decade in gaming. It's because our service really does work. And if it doesn't work, then you shouldn't pay. Check it out using the link in the description for a discount. And other than that, let's take a look at our fifth mistake. Now it's time for a bit of a contradiction since we just talked about dry scaling, so stick with us. Many players make the habit of just running around all willy-nilly, making all of the noise in the world. They're just dumping utility and letting everyone know exactly where their team is. Although it's bad to scale not using utility sometimes, it can be good to scale silently. This is called playing contact. Playing contact is simply walking into an area, making no noise, and taking that space completely silently. One of the biggest instances of playing contact that you'll see in Valorant is playing contact into A main or B main on Ascent after they've used up their information utility. Normally you want to play contact when you notice that the enemy team is playing very safely. They're not really fighting anything, there's not really a lot of trap setups, they're just sticking back and holding angles. With this, contact plays are also best paired when you have a teammate or two on the other side of the map making noise to divert attention away from you. This can lead to fairly free kills on over-aggressive enemies. But the true power of playing contact is to hold shift until contact with the enemy is made, and then exploding onto site with 3 or 4 players. The reason you do this is because your opponents are constantly adapting to the noise that you make. If they hear 3 players just barreling it down, they're going to smoke you off and molly the choke point, or even flash and fight you. But if you're completely quiet, they need to take risks. They have to jump peek or use utility to gather information. This is why drawing rotates can help a bit. If you have somebody making noise somewhere else, it will make defenders think that your team is over there. They won't be worried about you guys walking up on the other side of the map. Drawing rotates is not required for this type of play, but the main goal is to just get as close as possible to the site that you want to hit, and then hit it as quickly as possible before they can molly or smoke you. Contact plays are usually strongest on pistol rounds or on eco rounds when you kind of need something to get your opponents caught off guard. Just be careful though, because if you try to play contact on a gun round, say versus an operator, you might just end up walking straight into their crosshairs. Be mindful and strategic. Don't just play contact every round, but use this tool wisely and it will win you free rounds. Now, easily one of the biggest mistakes that we see players making every single day in their matches, honestly, this is probably the biggest thing that holds back most players, is that they just don't think fast enough. I know that sounds like a joke, but you quite literally need to think faster if you want to compete at a higher level. The thing is, you don't need to be making the right decisions half the time. You just need to be doing something with confidence. Remember the first tip, how we said it's better to just commit to a fight if you accidentally see somebody on your screen? It's just because you're committing to something rather than half-assing a play. When you're just wandering around, even just wasting 3 or 4 seconds, it can completely destroy the timing on you being able to make a play and win the round. You can get away with some crazy aggressive plays by just moving fast and making decisions quickly. Remember, hesitation is the key to defeat, so you really need to be thinking on your toes. It's not all on you though. It's easy for us to just say think faster. There's actually a secret to it. The best players are able to think so quickly because they've been in these situations dozens of times. What you need to start doing is getting comfortable making the same plays. Build up a playbook of different strats that you'll execute and perform nearly every single game. That way you'll feel comfortable with each play that you run. It's like how comedians tell the same jokes every night. It's not like they're just freestyling their set. It's called a set. They've practiced it. So practice your plays and figure out how to make them better. You will be fragging out in no time. Now, the 7th mistake that players are constantly making is that they'll make these aggressive plays, but they're not just aggressive, they're also stupid. When you're making a play, try to make it for a good reason. The thing about high elo players is that they still die in their matches. They still lose gunfights and make mistakes. But when they die or make a mistake, they're normally in a good enough position so that they'll get either traded or gather some sort of information that their team can actually get something out of. If you're just running into their spawn and dying with nobody around, you're not really gaining any value. It's their spawn. You could already assume that there are players there. There was no information gained, and your team is in a way worse position after losing you. Here's what I want you to do. Go to tracker.gg and look up your profile. Check this stat for your recent matches. KAST. This calculates the percentage of rounds during the game where you got a kill, assist, survived, or got traded. Basically, the higher this number, the higher the amount of rounds that you're having an impact. If your KAST is like 40%, you've got to bump those numbers up. Try to get around 70 to 80% if you're really trying to have an impact in your matches. To do this, you'll have to play closer with your teammates and rely less on solo plays to win the game. This might be an uphill battle at first, but trust us, you'll get the hang of it. Finally, the last mistake that players are making constantly is playing just way too much. It sounds weird, but if you're already familiar with the game and practiced, playing 15 games a day will not help you climb. Running games over and over, losing one after another, and sanity dropping all the while. Spam queuing is bad for your RR, your teammates, and your mental. If you lose a few games, it's wise to just hop off, take a break, and do something that would be more productive than queuing again into a loss. When you notice your mental deteriorating and you notice yourself getting more and more upset or annoyed within the game, give yourself a break. Sure, more time in the game will help you get better at the game, but it needs to be a focused effort. You can't just play to play, you need to play with purpose. The game will still be here later, and you'll thank yourself when you hop on next and see that you haven't lost 200 RR in one play session. Alright though guys, before we wrap this up, let me tell you a little bit more about SkillCapped. So we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered you that. Not us though. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium Valorant guides on the internet. We add new courses every month with over 1,000 guides curated into over 50 courses. No one can compare. We also have a direct line of communication with subscribers on our Discord so that you can get connected immediately to some of the best players in the game who will respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. That's going to be all for us today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.